Welcome, welcome, welcome. This is your host, Andrea Upting, and you are listening to the Direct Impact Podcast. On the Direct Impact Podcast, we explore all the many, many, many ways that we might enhance our mental health and leave a positive and life-giving impact in our wake. So today, I am very proud to reintroduce Dana Diaz. She is a wife, a mother, and author of the best-selling book, Gasping for Air: The Stronghold of Narcissistic Abuse. And she has been on our podcast before and did an amazing job. And so many of our betrayed partners have told me that they really enjoyed listening to that episode, and it really meant a lot to them. So thank you for sharing. So let's just dive into some of our questions, because I'm hoping that in the first episode, our listeners and our audience, they were able to really hear the pain and the suffering and the characteristics of what comes out of narcissistic abuse and betrayal and the trauma that comes with it. But also I want them to hear, like, one, that they're not alone, but two, just like, what are some of the red flags and the warning signs, and is there a life after this type of abuse and betrayal? So welcome, Dana.
Well, thank you. I'm sorry to discuss such, awful things, but I appreciate that we're trying to bring hope to people. And so, the quick answer to everything you just put out there is yes, 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 and yes. So, so there is life afterward, and I want to give that hope to people.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And thank you for your work and for your content that you've put out into the world, taking your hurt and your suffering and giving hope to others. I think that's what life's about.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the way I look at it is I don't ever want somebody to feel what I have felt, or endure the pain afterwards, because that betrayal trauma is the worst thing ever. The bruises heal, other stuff you can get past more easily, but betrayal, when somebody says they love you and they do all these things that don't make sense of what love should be, it's hard to wrap your head around.
It really is. It really is. The confusion, I think, that ensues from that, of when somebody says one thing and does the direct opposite at the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the one thing that I have always, it's interesting because I knew this as a teenager innately, because I was raised by two narcissistic parents, which is the second book that just came out. But I always had this feeling that one of the worst pains you can feel is that you loved or cared about somebody more than they apparently cared or loved you. I mean, that's a hard thing to know, that you invested so much of yourself, you gave so much of yourself, and the person thought so little of you that they could neither release you nor give you what you deserved. So it's tough. It can be tough. It really messes with you. That's not a very eloquent way to put it, but it really does. The confusion, I mean, it causes the depression, the anxiety, you get the physical, the migraines, the stomach aches, all this stuff. So it's a lot for people to try to understand, because I think people try to distract themselves, with ideas that maybe they're just too sensitive, or maybe there's something wrong with them. They're broken or deficient in some way. And nobody is broken or deficient. We're just all trying to get through it and figure it out, just like everybody else.
Mm-hmm. Well, you named some really powerful things there, and I heard you talk about, like, the pain of, like, investment, like how much energy and love and dedication and commitment, how much has been invested in relationships where none of that can possibly be reciprocated, and how long you try to get your needs met through somebody who can't do that.
Exactly. And I think that, I don't think I'm the only one that feels, or at least in my former marriage, I felt like, okay, I must not be doing enough to make him want to reciprocate the love, the kindness, the respect, all these, the consideration, all these basic foundations of, I think most of us can agree, are what a loving relationship should be, even a friendship, a family relationship. So it's like I would do more, do more, do more. And I thought, if I did more than he has to, it's kind of that yin and yang, that, if there's a different action, you get a different reaction. That's just life. That's just physics even. So it makes me sad that in that marriage, I found myself, because I didn't know what else to do. I didn't know what more I could do. I was trying so hard. I even more than once, unfortunately, went on Google and did a Google search, how to be a better wife, how to make my husband love me more. And, unfortunately, it took me 25 years, but I kind of finally got the hint that there is just nothing more I could have done. I could have been, quote unquote, perfect, the perfect wife, the perfect mother. It would never have been enough. And for me personally, this was a struggle that I had in my childhood. And basically the premise of that book is that there was nothing I could ever do. I was the scapegoat child. I was the child that was not wanted, whereas my brother was very much wanted. I could not be any more than what they decided that I should be. And so it was never going to be enough. And
There you go.
it's a hard thing to understand.
You hit the negative core belief, and I love that you've been able to identify that, yes, this negative core belief followed me into this narcissistic relationship.
100%.
But the negative core belief of I'm not and never going to be enough.
Exactly.
And that not enough, it continues to fuel that need to be more than enough, to be superhuman. And if I do all of this,
Yes.
then my
Yes.
needs will get met. And unfortunately, addiction, deception, narcissism, it defies the laws of physics, right?
It really
doesn't matter
does.
how much you invest, it's going to take it all and then some.
100%.
Yeah.
But as a child, it's hard not to want to get your parents' approval, especially when they're giving it to, in my case, my sibling, just not me. It would be different if I was the only child and they were just terrible parents, but the fact that they could be good parents to another child, that shows that it was a choice. But it's the same thing in a romantic relationship. And it's a very unfortunate that I'm 48 years old and I'm still, I think we come to certain times in our life where something, things poke at it sometimes, kind of like when you poke a bruise and you're like, oh, why do I do that? It's going to hurt, but then you leave it alone. Like, oh, we're just going to not worry about it and move on. But then there's times in your life, like when I did write that second book, basically as an answer to the first book of how does somebody end up in this kind of adult romantic relationship where I mean, forgive me, but you're basically allowing the treatments because, as you mentioned in the beginning, it's, what are the red flags? I have found out that I can list a million narcissistic qualities and qualities of abusive people. But guess what? What I have found, we are the red flag. We are the red flag because I have a sister, but by our biological father, she was raised by two parents who loved her very much, wanted her. She's confident. She has very good self-esteem, very intelligent. She wouldn't have given my ex-husband 2 seconds of her time. She would have known very clearly, you are crossing my boundaries. I have boundaries. This is not acceptable to me. Thank you. Well wishes, but moving on. Me, I was that, okay, well, this doesn't feel good. And you remind me of my abusive stepfather, but I really am desperate for somebody to love me. It doesn't even matter who, but okay. Kind of like that puppy that's eager for that treat, just like shaking, when they shake.
Yeah.
They're trembling because they need it so desperately that they will do anything. And it's so sad to me that I was raised basically primed to be in a marriage like that, in a romantic relationship like that. But thank God that, I am self-aware enough that I was able to figure out, okay, this is the thing. So yes, that not good enough feeling, that deficiency that we feel, that core, boy, it's like digging up a rose bush. I don't know if anyone's ever done that, but it's an awful, awful thing because it's not as easy as digging up other plants. You keep thinking you're getting to the bottom and it just keeps, and it hurts and it's awful, that healing and going through the therapy and discovering all these other things that it exposes. But it's so necessary because we need to come to terms that it's okay if we're not enough for those people. we're not going to be good enough for everybody.
Nobody
And we
could be
might,
enough for certain
no.
people.
And we might
And
be too, I have
personality.
encountered, right. And I have encountered some people that I'm too much for. They say I'm too much. I'm over the top. You're so, but somewhere in the middle, it's amazing, but there's people who think I'm just fine. There's a just right. And those are our people, but this is something we need to really understand so that we don't feel badly about ourselves, so that we don't internalize it. Yes, it's awful when your own mother rejects you and you're estranged from your own parents and family goes with them, and then there's this grief and how do you not feel like it's not you? You're the common denominator in every relationship that goes sour. But I think it's because we carry all these things with us. And I hate to say, it's like some vibe or energy we put out. And then we have these little characteristics and it comes off awkward or weird or whatever. And people don't know how to receive us. But we're not even sure about ourselves. We're not sure where we fit, where we belong, who we even are sometimes. So it's so essential to get to the point where you're ready. And I think that's the key. You have to be actually ready to do the work, because it's not about going every Tuesday at 2 o'clock to talk to somebody. There is work involved outside of working with your therapist or whatever, life coach, whoever you decide to help you. There is a lot of work, a lot of inner reflection, a lot of honesty with yourself. You have to be like raw as far as how you acknowledge your feelings, even the bad ones, even the things you don't like about yourself. You have to open that all up so that you can fully embrace who you are and be okay with who you are.
But I love how you've been able to identify that there is an inner child and other parts of self that go into these relationships with you
Oh,
and
yeah.
are trying to heal in these relationships, but oftentimes they just get re-injured and re-wounded because they haven't healed, been healed yet. And they're still
Yes.
continuing to look for other people and other relationships to heal them, and that's not the way it works.
No, it's
Mhm.
not. We have to figure out how to do it ourselves. And
Mhm.
I'm going to say this, we talk about inner child stuff a lot. People hear this a lot. Maybe I have multiple personalities, but I think there are different aspects of our personality. But for me, it was finding out there was that little 4 or 5-year-old little girl who
Yeah.
was just really sad that her mom couldn't be affectionate, that her mom wouldn't love her. And she's okay. She's also probably the girl that is now remarried to a man that's much older. And, yeah, we got some daddy issues, but you know what? I'm in a very loving and healthy, dare I say, relationship. But the one that I'm really struggling with is I have this angry 15-year-old
Yeah.
that when she got to that age and realized she was being mistreated and stood up for herself and paid the consequences of that, she never got justice.
Mhm.
Child services turned their back on her. The police turned their back on her. People were seeing what was happening, neighbors, teachers, all these people. And just, back then you didn't talk about it. Shh, we
Mhm.
don't talk about that. Don't say anything. That's not nice. And she's pissed. She's pissed.
And
And
rightfully
that's the
so.
one. Right. But
Yeah.
it's interesting because what I struggle with, and I think a lot of people can understand this, if you have that angry teenager inside of you, anger scares the heck out of me, because in my childhood and in my previous marriage, when emotions escalate, oh my gosh, it's that fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. And I've always said I'm a runner. I get the heck out of there at the first sign of anger. So to acknowledge that I'm angry, I remember the first time my therapist said, I think you have a lot of unresolved anger. I'm like, I'm not angry. It's bad to be angry. Oh no, that's scary. I'm not angry. That's not who I am. Oh
Mhm.
no, I'm angry.
Yeah, but you just hit the nail on the head there when you said it's bad to be angry. That's why it was
Yeah.
repressed. That's why it was suppressed, because
Hmm.
feelings are all healthy, natural, amazing, wonderful. But when we have feelings about our feelings, when we have assigned some kind of role to these feelings, then they can
Yes.
get a little unhealthy. Yeah.
Uh-huh. They bite you in the butt is exactly what
Mhm.
happens. But you have to learn to confront them, face them. But I think the biggest part of any of this is to forgive yourself. I honestly don't believe that forgiving other people is necessary for your healing. I think the most important person to forgive is yourself, to give yourself that grace to say, I am not perfect. Apparently, I have qualities that they have too. And I would even go so far as to say, and this was brought up to me in one of my sessions, is that you cannot hate somebody and reject them when they have hated and rejected you, especially when that's your mother and that's your father and people that you are actually a product of, whether you like it or not. Rejecting them is rejecting part of yourself. And so you have to learn to forgive yourself for not being perfect, give yourself the grace to not be perfect, but also be, aware enough to know that if this is not something that makes you feel good, if this is not something that shows up in your relationships in a healthy way, if it deters you in some way, then you need to find a way to resolve it. You need to figure that out.
That's right. So you've already mentioned probably about 30 if I replayed this, but I'd like for you to name a few, just like in your opinion, some key characteristics or virtues, so positive qualities that narcissists generally prey upon.
Prey upon. They look for somebody who's vulnerable. That's the key thing. If they see a slight crack in your facade where there's a little room for them to stick their claws in, they are looking for somebody who feels that feeling of not being enough, that is missing love, that is missing feeling like they belong or they're a part of something, because essentially a narcissist wants you all to themselves. They want you basically to serve them, serve their ego. They don't want you to have family and friends, so I've noticed this as well. They do look for people who come from, I don't even like saying this word, but broken homes, but that's a
Dysfunctional
common
homes.
phrase. But
Yeah.
yeah, they look for people that are even more kind of loners, somebody that, they feel won't have the influence of others, of friends or a mom or somebody saying, oh no, that person's not so good for you. But all in all, vulnerable. They like that vulnerability because you're also very eager. They know that you're going to be eager to attach to somebody, because let's be real, we all want connection, don't we? That's a basic human need, is to feel like we are connected to another human being, that we are close with that human being. We have this fantasy about soulmates and twin flames and all these things. We want that person. So, it's somebody who they perceive as being flawed enough that they can isolate, solely influence, and basically keep all to themselves.
So dependence, someone who will become
Oh,
dependent on them.
100%. Yeah, because
So
they don't want somebody that's going to leave them. They want you to stay. Even when things get really, really bad, they need to know you're going to stay.
Yeah. So you're highlighting the importance of being an emotionally independent, functional adult, because a narcissist would run for the hills if they encountered someone like that, right?
Exactly. Like I
Yeah.
used my sister as an example before, but it's funny because when my ex-husband, when we were still married and he first met my sister, oh, I don't like her. I don't like her. Well, of course he didn't like her because she was, yeah, exactly what you just said.
Yeah.
Very intelligent, very secure, very confident. And he knew if I was close with her, if I spent too much time with her, it might be contagious. Just like
Mm.
our neighbor, when we got a new neighbor, oh, I don't like that new neighbor. It's funny, I liked her a lot. I was very excited to make this connection. But you want to talk about a strong woman, strong-willed woman over there, and she didn't like him either. So yeah, they sniff that out and that scares them. So they don't want you having anything to do with that, nor do they want to be with somebody that's like that.
Yeah, that's really, really helpful. And I mean, I think if our audience hears one thing, I mean, it's like these are the things that we're working towards, is emotional independence and strength
Yes,
and autonomy and, our own integrity, so that, we're not susceptible to
exactly.
somebody, like that. Um, and, I keep saying that over and over, that just finding our own authenticity and personal strength to stand in, it allows you to guard against some dysfunction. because
Right.
especially when you grow up in a dysfunctional family system, this is just very easy. It's almost like a moth to a flame. You get pulled
Yes.
towards this type of energy. Yeah.
Well, absolutely, because I can honestly say this is that I remember even in high school, there were a couple nice boys that asked me on dates, and I wanted with the one so badly. He's just a nice guy. I didn't know what to do with that though. So I said no. I went for the bad boys. I went for the guys that were treating me like crap, that talked down to me and were rude to me, because I knew how to navigate that. To me, unfortunately, that felt like love, because at home I was being told I love you, followed by unloving behavior. And so I thought that's what love was. I thought that was the same thing. In fact, my mother would even tell me oftentimes, well, your stepfather is, well, it was abuse, but he's treating you that way because he cares so much about you. She actually said that to me many times. So even though it didn't make sense, and even though I called her out on it as I got to be a teenager and it didn't sound right, I internalized it because that is what I knew. And even now with my husband that I'm married to now, he grew up in a nice home, doesn't understand any of this, but he's very gracious with me. But there have been times early in our relationship that I mean, I remember once, it was the first time I started some arguments over a bottle of ketchup. It was the dumbest thing that any objective person looking in, they would have thought she's nuts. But you know what it was? I can honestly say, I it was too good. Things were too calm. We got along too well. We didn't have disagreements. We didn't have conflict. Even when we did, have something we did disagree on, it wasn't a thing. It wasn't an issue. We could have a normal, mature talk about it, maybe even still disagree at the end and still be laughing and loving each other. But I needed chaos. I needed to start trouble because to me, I needed to feel that conflict in order to feel loved.
Yeah.
And it was a bottle of ketchup.
Thank you for that. I think that is a great illustration on how in a dysfunctional family system you relate intensity to connection. And
Yes.
I talk to men and women all the time where they feel like these healthy relationships are so vanilla, they're so boring, I'm not getting my needs met.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, and it's because the intensity is not there, and you were, programmed to believe that that intensity equaled some type of love or care or concern. And
Exactly.
it's
And
very,
it's hard. I'm still undoing it, but there are times like I just sometimes literally stop myself and say, we don't do that anymore, Dana. We don't do that. And, my husband thankfully gets that sometimes I just have to, just take a minute because I know I'm going down that road I've always gone down, but it's not worth it. I'm still navigating this new territory where we don't have to argue and have conflict, and people don't have to do, bad things to each other in order to feel love. And so if you can find a person that gets that and supports you through it, because it's a very conscious effort, even through all the therapy and all the healing,
oh yeah,
it'll still creep up on you once in a while. And you just have to be aware and just stop yourself, take a breath and move on. It's
yeah.
not, you don't need that in your life. And no, we don't want that either, but we just don't know any other way.
And let's give ourselves grace for the default modes that
Right.
that have been programmed in us. Like we always have like, oh, I'm going to default to this. But like you said, you can learn to recognize and pull yourself back and lean on your skills and the new information you've gotten. So
Yeah, exactly.
I
I
think
always
that,
look at it in my mind. I like to hike. I like nature. So in my mind, I actually visualize a path where, that divides into two different directions. The
mhm.
direction I've always gone, which in my head is, very woodsy and dark and whatever, and the other path where I see light ahead and there's sunshine and rainbows and everything else. And so it's like I'm going down that dark, and then I'm like, nope, we want to go down that way. Let's switch it up a bit. So, if that helps anybody, sometimes just visualizing, or which door to go through or whatever it is, just remind yourself that it's okay to go the other direction. Worst case, you can go back the other way, but try a new route, because, that path less traveled usually leads to new and exciting things that may be different, but they might be better.
Yeah, it's hard work and worth it at the same time.
Yes.
So I think that takes us to our last question, Dana, which is, taking the pain and the suffering and using the trauma to grow and to go
Yes.
down the road less traveled. So how what are some things that you have done and how have you achieved some traumatic growth?
Oh, there's a lot to that one. Things I have done. Like I said, I think it's just giving yourself time. Don't force yourself and don't pressure yourself. If you're not, you could go to therapy and work with somebody for months and feel like you're not making progress, but you're making progress if you're still working hard at it. But again, I go back to being honest with yourself, being realistic, about what you can handle. There are days where I know it's just I didn't get much sleep or whatever it is where it's just like you can only do so much. So maybe on those days I don't need to work so hard, and maybe on those days I don't need to pressure myself to do that work with the inner child or read the book that was suggested or even help counsel others on that day because I'm not doing the best. So I always tell people it's kind of like when you're on the airplane and they say if the oxygen mask falls down, put it on yourself first and then put it on your favorite kid or your spouse or whatever it is. And you do have to just take care of yourself. I think that's one of the biggest things that I've learned, that it's not selfish to do that, because I think especially when we come from these dysfunctional families and then, we have a failed marriage that, maybe was toxic, we just give because we're still, part of us is still looking for that external validation, somebody to be approving of us, somebody to love us, a place to belong. And we need to remember, like, we need to just slow down sometimes and just say, okay, today is not my best day. I am not going to be as productive as I can be. I'm not going to be the best wife, the best mother, whatever, unless I take care of me. And I think part of that too is remembering to do the things that bring you joy. You don't have to distract yourself and be busy with work and the house and the kids and all the stuff all the time and please everybody else. Sometimes you just need to stop and just be and be playful and laugh and smile, because what's the point of life if we're not even happy? And it's hard to do this work and do all this stuff and not have those moments of joy that you're allowing yourself. So
And I love that as we bleed into kind of like a call to action for our audience, because I think we do start to realize traumatic growth when there is that joy and that play, and you
yes,
start to allow things. It's just you allowing things to be easier.
yes.
You
And
know,
that is the key word, is allowing, because I even know I wouldn't allow it. I was the girl that went to parties and barbecues because I wanted to be part of something, but I would wash the dishes or clean things up because I didn't know how to interact with, I don't know how to let people in or let them see who I was, because I
right.
just assumed that they wouldn't like me, because how
Mhm.
could they if my own mother didn't? And if my ex had found so much fault, how could anyone? So I just kind of hid in my own little world and I didn't let anybody in. It's that guard we put up. We don't trust that other people's might like us, and we don't trust ourselves sometimes.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I think it's easier said than done. And I think it
Yeah.
is really important, though, especially when you've grown up in a family system where you've been programmed that your worth only comes from meeting the needs of others. And if I
Yes.
meet the needs of others, then I'm okay. Then I'm going to be okay. Then I'll be taken care of. It becomes critical that play and joy and just doing something for the sake of you wanting to do it
Yeah.
is so huge. I asked a client a few weeks ago, I've been actually giving this assignment out lately. It's like go to the trampoline park.
Yes. And that's actually
Go,
loads of
go
fun.
jump, go play in the balls, go, take a friend, throw the balls
Yes.
at people, splash in a puddle. Just when it crosses your mind to be playful, be willing to do it. Because for a
Yes.
lot of people, there is a great deal of resistance to having fun, to having play, to having to
Yes.
make it, to allowing it to be easy. And
A
so
100%.
a phenomenal call to action, I think, for our audience.
Yes.
You know, when you start to realize traumatic growth, you have joy in your heart. That's nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. Where can our listeners find you? And give us the title of your new book coming out, or the
Yeah,
second.
absolutely. Second book is called Choking on Shame, the
Mhm.
Scapegoat Child in a Narcissistic Family. Yeah, it's a rough one. It's pretty intense. I've had many people say that after the first couple chapters, they need to stop and take a minute and breathe. So it's an intense ride, but definitely brings some understanding to how narcissism can play out in a family, and where you are the only child that is treated this way, which isn't a dynamic that everybody experiences. But people can find me on my website, danasdiaz.com. Links to Facebook and Instagram are there. Links to the book are both of the books are there. Otherwise, Amazon is everybody's go-to. You can get both books in ebook on Kindle as well. So I encourage anybody, if they have any questions or want to reach out, also just message me, email me through the website. I do respond to everything personally. So I do like to hear feedback. And if I'm able to help anyone in any way, I can direct them to whatever resources.
Oh, thank you so much, Dana. And we're going to link to every bit of that in our show
Wonderful.
notes and make sure that all of our listeners can have access to you. And I hope that y'all use Dana as a resource because, I mean, like she's been there, she's been through it,
Yes.
she's come through. So please do lean on her for that. So thank you so much, Dana. Today you have made a direct impact.
Thank you.